They called her worthless, a burden, the one nobody wanted. But when the cursed king's tower demanded a sacrifice and every noble family in the kingdom looked away, she was the only one who walked through those iron gates. Not because she was brave, because she had nothing left to lose. What happened inside changed everything. If you want to see how the girl they threw away became the woman who saved a kingdom, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see where in the world you're watching from. This is her story. The morning they announced the tower's demand, Vera Dane was stealing bread. Not well either. Her fingers fumbled with the cloth covering the baker's morning batch, and old Morwen caught her wrist before she'd even pulled the loaf free. Again? The baker's voice carried across the market square. Third time this month, girl. Vera didn't fight the grip. There wasn't any point. She was 17, too thin, and her dress had been patched so many times the original fabric was barely visible. Everyone in Lowgate knew her face, the orphan girl who lived in the church basement, who cleaned chamber pots for coppers, who never quite managed to disappear the way she should. I'll work it off, Vera said. The words tasted like ash. They always did. You'll work nothing off. You've got no value, girl. Can't cook, can't sew worth a damn, can't even steal properly. Morwen released her wrist with a shove. Get out of my sight. The crowd that had gathered didn't even pretend to look away. They watched her stumble backward, watched her cheeks burn red, watched her retreat with the same detached interest they'd give a dogfight. This was entertainment in Lowgate, the morning's gossip. By noon, everyone would know Vera Dane had been caught stealing again. She made it 3 streets before her stomach cramped hard enough to double her over. 2 days. She'd gone 2 days without eating anything but the heel of bread she'd found in the church donation basket. Father Timon meant well, but the donations had dried up weeks ago. Everyone in Lowgate was hungry. The difference was that everyone else had families. People who'd share their last potato, split their final egg. Vera had no one. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall of a tannery, breathing through her mouth to avoid the stench. Her vision swam. Stupid. She was so stupid. She should have waited until evening, should have been faster, should have— Make way! Make way for the King's Herald! The shout cut through the market noise like a blade. Vera forced herself upright. A herald meant news from the capital. In Lowgate, that was never good. The crowd surged toward the square, and she let herself be pulled along with it. Better to know what fresh hell was coming than to be surprised by it later. The herald stood on the same platform they used for hangings. He was young, younger than Vera had expected, with the kind of clean-shaven face that said he'd never missed a meal in his life. His cloak bore the king's seal, not King Cale's cursed northern tower, but the real king in Southaven, the one who still ruled the rest of the kingdom while his cursed brother rotted in isolation. By order of His Majesty King Aldrich, the herald announced, his voice carrying across the packed square, the northern tower requires a servant. The crowd went still. Vera felt ice creep down her spine. Everyone knew about the northern tower. Everyone knew about King Cale Varine, the cursed king who'd been locked away 5 years ago after his own magic had turned against him. The brother who'd been deemed too dangerous to execute, but too monstrous to rule. They said his touch could freeze a man's heart solid. They said he'd killed 3 servants already. They said he was more ice than man now, barely human, barely sane. The position offers a monthly wage of 50 silver crowns, the herald continued. Gasps rippled through the crowd. 50 silver was more money than most Lowgate families saw in a year. Room and board provided. The term of service is 1 year. If you survive that long, someone muttered behind Vera, volunteers may present themselves at the North Gate by sunset tomorrow. The herald's eyes swept the crowd. This is a great honor, to serve the crown, especially in such difficult circumstances. He didn't believe a word of it. Vera could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way he rushed through the last sentence. This wasn't an honor. This was a death sentence with a salary. The herald left quickly, his guards forming up around him like he expected the crowd to turn violent. They didn't. They just stood there, processing what they'd heard. Then, slowly, people started to laugh. 50 silver, someone said. Might as well be 50,000. What good's coin to a corpse? They're getting desperate up there, another voice added. Must have run out of fools willing to walk into that tower. Who'd be stupid enough? Not me. Never. I've got children to think about. Vera listened to them make their excuses, watched them shake their heads and turn away. Within minutes, the square had cleared. Everyone had somewhere else to be. Somewhere safer. She stood there alone, staring at the empty platform. 50 silver crowns. The number burned in her mind. With 50 silver, she could leave Lowgate, could buy passage to one of the southern cities where nobody knew her face, could eat every day, could sleep in a real bed instead of the church basement where the rats ran across her feet at night. 1 year of service. If she survived. When she survived, her mind corrected automatically, though she didn't believe it. Vera turned and walked back toward the church. Her hands were shaking. From hunger, probably. Definitely from hunger. Not from what she was thinking. Not from the idea taking shape in her head like frost forming on glass. Father Timon found her that evening in the basement, sitting on her bedroll with her few possessions spread out in front of her. One spare dress, a wooden comb missing half its teeth, a letter her mother had written before she died. The ink so faded Vera could barely read it anymore. "I heard about the announcement," Father Timon said carefully. He was old, older than he looked. Bent from decades of trying to help people who couldn't be helped. Terrible business. Vera didn't look up. "How much do you think I could get for this comb?" Vera, "It's real wood. Not great quality, but real." "You can't be serious. 2 coppers, maybe? 3 if I find the right buyer?" "Listen to me." Father Timon lowered himself onto the floor beside her, his knees cracking. "I know things are hard. I know you're struggling. But that tower, what they're asking, it's not a solution. It's suicide." "You don't know that." 3 servants, Vera. 3 dead in 5 years. 3 out of how many? She finally met his eyes. Maybe some of them ran. Maybe some of them quit and took their wages and started new lives somewhere else. She knew that wasn't true. They both did. Father Timon reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "There are other ways," he said quietly. "I could speak to some families. Find you a position." "You've been trying that for 3 years." The words came out harder than she meant. "Nobody wants me. You know that. I know that. I'm not skilled enough for the merchants, not pretty enough for the noble houses, and too old to apprentice anywhere that matters." "So you'll walk into a tower where the very air kills people?" "I'll walk into a tower where I might actually matter," Vera's voice cracked. "Even if it's just for a few months, even if all I do is prove I was brave enough to try. That's more than I have here." The old priest looked at her for a long moment. "This isn't bravery, child. This is desperation. Maybe those are the same thing." He left her alone after that. Probably went to pray. Father Timon had always believed prayer could fix things, that faith was enough to fill empty stomachs and warm, cold nights. Vera had stopped believing in prayer around the same time she'd started believing in survival. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the tower, black stone rising against a gray sky, windows like empty eyes, the kind of structure that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. She'd never been north of Lowgate, but she'd seen drawings, heard stories. They said King Kyle had been handsome once, charming, the kind of prince who could make serving girls blush and nobles scheme. Then his magic had manifested wrong, twisted, turned inward. They said he'd frozen his own betrothed during their engagement ball. Not on purpose, just by touching her hand. After that, they'd locked him away. For everyone's safety, they said. Especially his own. 5 years in that tower. 5 years alone except for the servants who came and went, mostly went, fled in terror or carried out in pieces, depending on who was telling the story. What kind of man would that make him? What kind of monster? Vera rolled onto her side, pulling her thin blanket tighter. It didn't matter what kind of monster he was. Monsters didn't scare her anymore. She'd been living with them her whole life. The merchant who'd refused to pay her for a week's work, the landlord who'd evicted her family when her mother got sick, the baker who'd rather see her starve than lose a single loaf. At least the cursed king's monstrosity was honest. Morning came too quickly. Vera packed her few belongings into a canvas sack. The dress, the comb, the letter. She left the letter on Father Timon's desk with a note. "Thank you for trying." The walk to the north gate took most of the day. She had to stop twice to rest, her legs weak from hunger and her head light from lack of sleep. By the time she reached the massive iron gates that separated the northern district from the rest of the kingdom, the sun was beginning to set. 2 guards stood watch. They looked bored. "I'm here about the position," Vera said. Both guards turned to stare at her. One of them, older, with a scar running from his eye to his jaw, actually laughed. "You?" "Me." "Girl, go home." "I am home. This is as close to home as I've got." She straightened her shoulders, trying to look more confident than she felt. The herald said volunteers should present themselves by sunset. "Here I am." The younger guard exchanged a glance with his partner. "She's serious." "She's insane. Maybe. But she's here." The younger one stepped forward. "You know what you're walking into?" "I know what I'm walking away from," Vera said. "That's enough." The older guard shook his head. "Your funeral. Come on then. We'll take you to the steward." They led her through the gates and into a district she'd only ever seen from a distance. The northern quarter was older than the rest of the kingdom, built from black stone that seemed to drink in the fading light. The streets were empty. No merchants, no children playing, no warm light spilling from tavern windows. Just silence. And in the distance, rising above everything else, the tower. It was worse up close. Taller than she'd imagined, narrow and sharp like a blade pointed at the sky. No lights in any of the windows, no smoke from the chimneys. It looked abandoned. It looked exactly like the kind of place where things went to die. "Still sure about this?" the younger guard asked. Vera's throat was dry. "Yes." They left her at a small stone building at the tower's base. Inside, an ancient man sat behind a desk covered in papers. He looked up when she entered, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation. "Another one," he muttered. "I'm here for—" "I know why you're here." He pulled out a fresh piece of parchment. "Name?" "Vera Dane." "Age?" 17. "Next of kin?" She hesitated. "None." The steward's pen paused. He looked at her properly for the first time. "No one?" "No one." Something like pity flickered across his face, there and gone. "Previous employment?" "Cleaning, laundry, kitchen work." She didn't mention the stealing. Whatever people needed. "Any experience with—" He gestured vaguely upward toward the tower. "Difficult situations?" "I've survived 17 years in Lowgate with no family and no money. Does that count?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "It might, actually." He finished writing and pushed the parchment toward her. "Sign here. You'll start tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock. Don't be late." "That's it? No interview? No—" "Girl, you're the first person to walk through that door in 8 months. The position is yours if you want it." He met her eyes. "Though I strongly suggest you don't want it." Vera picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she signed her name. The steward sighed. "Brave or stupid? Haven't decided which yet. Can it be both?" "Usually is." He stood, joints creaking. "There's a room in the servants' quarters. 3rd door on the left. Meals are provided. You'll be given your duties in the morning." "What kind of duties?" "The kind that keep you alive." He walked to the door, then paused. "One piece of advice. When you meet him, because you will meet him, they always do eventually, don't try to run. It makes things worse." "What makes things better?" The steward's laugh was bitter. "Nothing, as far as I know. But running definitely makes it worse." He left her there, standing in the middle of his office with a signed contract and a future that stretched exactly as far as tomorrow morning. The servants' quarters were as empty as the streets. Vera's room was small, a bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the dark countryside. Clean, at least. Cleaner than anywhere she'd slept in years. Someone had left a meal on the dresser. Bread, cheese, cold meat, real food. Vera ate slowly, making each bite last, letting herself believe, just for a moment, that she'd made the right choice. Then she lay down in the darkness and listened to the tower settle around her. Stone creaking, wind howling through empty corridors. And somewhere, high above, something that might have been footsteps or might have been her imagination. The cursed king was up there. Tomorrow, she'd meet him. Tomorrow, her real test would begin. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, Vera Dane slept with a full stomach and a roof over her head that didn't leak. It felt almost like hope. Almost. 5 o'clock came before Vera was ready for it. She woke to someone pounding on her door, disoriented and still half caught in dreams of ice. For a moment she thought she was back in the church basement, that the past day had been nothing but hunger-induced hallucination. Then she saw the clean walls, the window showing pre-dawn darkness, the empty plate from last night's meal. Real. This was real. "Up!" a woman's voice barked from the hallway. "You've got 10 minutes before I come in there and drag you out myself." Vera scrambled out of bed, her feet hitting cold stone. She'd slept in her clothes, the nicer of her two dresses, though nice was relative when both had been mended so many times they were more thread than fabric. A uniform hung on the back of the door. She must have been too exhausted to notice it last night. Plain gray wool, sturdy and warm, with an apron that actually looked clean. Servant's clothes, but better quality than anything she'd owned in years. She changed quickly, fumbling with buttons her cold fingers didn't want to cooperate with. The uniform fit poorly. Too long in the arms, too loose in the waist. But it would do. When she opened the door, a woman was waiting in the hall. Older? Maybe 50, with iron gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her expression suggested she'd eaten something sour and was still tasting it. "You're the new girl." It wasn't a question, but Vera answered anyway. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. I'm Hannah, head of household, such as it is." Her eyes raked over Vera from head to foot. "You're skinny." "I know." "Can you lift 20 pounds? "If I have to." "You'll have to." Hannah turned and started walking, not checking to see if Vera followed. "Kitchen's this way." "You'll eat, then I'll show you your duties. And before you ask, no, you don't get to meet him right away. You work the lower floors until I decide you're ready." Vera hurried to keep up. The tower's interior was as cold as she'd feared, maybe colder. Her breath misted in front of her face. How long does that usually take? Depends on the servant. How long did it take the last one? Hannah's pace didn't slow, but something in her shoulders tensed. 2 days. She made it 2 days before she went upstairs uninvited. Thought she could handle it. What happened? What do you think happened? Hannah pushed through a doorway into a large kitchen. Warmth hit Vera like a physical thing. 2 massive fireplaces roaring on opposite walls, steam rising from pots on the stove. She lasted about 5 minutes in his presence before she started screaming, ran all the way back to Lowgate and never came back for her wages. She lived, though. Hannah turned to look at her properly. "Is that what you call living?" Girl lost her mind. Last I heard, she was in a charity house down south, still babbling about the cold and the ice in his eyes. She pointed to a table. "Sit, eat, don't waste food." Vera sat. Within minutes, a bowl of porridge appeared in front of her, along with actual butter and honey. Coffee, too. Real coffee, not the burnt grain substitute she was used to. She ate slowly, aware of Hannah watching her from across the kitchen. "You're different from the others," Hannah said finally. "How?" "You haven't asked if he's really cursed. You haven't asked if the stories are true." She poured herself coffee, her movements economical and practiced. "Every other servant who's come through here spent their first morning trying to convince me it was all exaggeration, that the curse couldn't be as bad as people said." Vera swallowed a mouthful of porridge. "I don't care if it's exaggerated." "No? The stories could be 10 times worse than reality, and I'd still be better off here than where I came from." Something almost like respect flickered across Hannah's face. "Maybe you'll last longer than 2 days after all." The morning passed in a blur of instructions and labor. Hannah showed her the supply rooms, the cleaning schedules, the parts of the tower that were maintained versus the parts that had been sealed off years ago. There were only 3 other servants, an old groundskeeper who never spoke, a cook who barely looked at Vera, and a young man named Thomas who worked the stables. "That's it?" Vera asked when Hannah finished the tour. 5 people to maintain an entire tower? Used to be 20, before the curse got bad. Hannah handed her a bucket and brush. "Now most people won't come within a mile of this place. Can't say I blame them. Start with the second floor hall. Work your way toward the stairs, not away from them." "Why?" "Because if you work away from the stairs, you get too close to his rooms. And if you get too close, he'll know you're there." Vera's hands tightened on the bucket handle. "What happens then?" "Nothing good. Now go. And don't stop to explore. The faster you work, the faster you can get back to the warm parts of the tower." The second floor was colder than the first. Vera felt it the moment she stepped into the corridor, a drop in temperature so sharp it made her gasp. Frost covered the windows, thick enough that she couldn't see outside. The walls themselves seemed to radiate chill, as if the stone had been carved from a glacier instead of quarried from normal rock. She started scrubbing. The work was hard but familiar. She'd spent years cleaning other people's homes, other people's messes. This was just more of the same, except instead of chamber pots and cooking grease, she was dealing with ice that formed faster than she could chip it away. An hour in, her hands were numb despite the gloves Hannah had provided. 2 hours in, her teeth were chattering so hard she had to clench her jaw to make them stop. But she kept working, kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant dwelling on the fact that somewhere above her, in the upper reaches of this frozen nightmare, the cursed king was doing whatever cursed kings did with their days. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming from the floor above. Vera froze, brush suspended over a patch of frost. The footsteps moved slowly, following a path directly overhead. She tracked the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs. They stopped. Right above her. The temperature plummeted. Vera's breath came out in clouds so thick she could barely see through them. Ice crept across the floor, spreading from the walls in delicate, deadly patterns. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to drop the bucket and run back down to the kitchen, where it was warm and safe, and the cursed king's presence couldn't reach. Instead, she straightened up and looked at the ceiling. "I'm just cleaning," she said to the empty air. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Not trying to bother you, just doing my job." Silence. The cold pressed down on her like a weight. Her lungs burned with each breath. Then, slowly, the footsteps resumed. Moving away this time, retreating deeper into the tower's heart. The temperature rose. Not much, but enough that Vera could breathe without feeling like her chest was freezing from the inside out. She waited another minute to make sure he was really gone, then picked up her brush and went back to work. Her hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get a proper grip. Hannah found her an hour later, still scrubbing. "I heard him moving." The older woman's voice was carefully neutral. "Heard him stop." "He did. And you're still here." "I told you, I'm not running." Hannah looked at her for a long moment. "Come on. You've done enough for today. Any more and you'll lose fingers to frostbite." Lunch was soup and bread, eaten in the kitchen while Hannah grilled her about what had happened. Vera answered as honestly as she could. The footsteps, the cold, the way she'd felt his attention on her like a physical pressure. "You spoke to him," Hannah said. "I spoke to the ceiling." "Same thing." The older woman drummed her fingers on the table. "That was stupid." "Probably." "You know what happened to the servant before last? The one before the screaming girl?" Vera shook her head. "Man named Robert. Strong, confident. Thought he could handle anything." Hannah's jaw tightened. "He tried talking to the king, too. Got it in his head that if he just acted normal, treated him like a person instead of a monster, things would be fine." "What happened?" "The king froze him solid. Right there in the corridor. Took us 3 days to chip him out, and another week before he could walk again. He left the same day he could stand on his own." The soup turned to lead in Vera's stomach. "Why didn't the king just kill him?" "Because he doesn't want to kill anyone. That's the whole problem." Hannah stood abruptly, collecting the empty bowls. The curse reacts to emotion. Fear, anger, anything strong enough to matter. The more he feels, the worse it gets. So he locks himself away, tries to feel nothing, and slowly goes mad from isolation. That's not a life. It's the life he's got. And you do well to remember that before you go trying to have conversations with him. But Vera couldn't forget. As she went back to work that afternoon, this time on the first floor, a concession to her frozen hands, she kept thinking about what Hannah had said. A man trying not to feel anything. A curse that fed on emotion. 5 years of that. 5 years alone in a tower with nothing but cold and silence, and the knowledge that everyone he'd ever cared about had locked him away like a rabid dog. That night, she dreamed of ice again. But this time, she saw a figure in the frost, tall and still, watching her from the shadows. When she woke, her room was so cold she could see her breath. The window was open. Vera got up slowly, her heart racing. She hadn't opened that window. She was sure of it. She crossed to the sill and looked out. The ground stretched below, silver with frost under the moonlight. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But when she reached to close the window, she found something on the sill, a single white flower, frozen solid, the kind that only grew in the deepest winter, in places where normal plants couldn't survive. She picked it up carefully. It was perfect, every petal preserved in ice, every detail sharp and clear. Someone had left this for her. There was only one person it could have been. Vera set the flower on her dresser and climbed back into bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape, counting the hours until she could collect her wages and run like all the others. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Curiosity. The next morning, Hannah sent her to the third floor. "You're sure?" Vera asked, surprised. "I've only been here 2 days. You lasted longer than the screaming girl, and you didn't freeze when he noticed you yesterday. Either you're braver than you look or too stupid to know better." Hannah thrust a bucket into her hands. "Third floor, east wing. Stay away from the west. That's where his quarters are. Don't linger. Don't explore. Get your work done and get back down." The third floor was worse than the second. The cold was aggressive here, attacking rather than just existing. Ice coated everything, walls, floors, even the ceiling in places. Vera had to chip it away before she could even start cleaning properly. She worked for an hour before she heard them. Voices, low and angry, coming from somewhere deeper in the tower. Vera knew she should ignore them, should keep her head down and focus on the work. But the voices were coming from the direction of the west wing, and one of them didn't sound like Hannah or any of the other servants. It sounded younger, rougher, desperate. She set down her bucket and moved toward the sound, her footsteps silent on the frozen stone. The voices grew clearer. "Can't keep doing this." A man's voice strained. "You can't just lock yourself away forever." No response. Just silence and the creaking of ice. "Say something. Anything. You're still my brother, damn it." Vera reached a corner and risked a glance around it. 2 figures stood in the corridor ahead, one tall and rigid, wrapped in dark clothes that seemed to absorb what little light existed. The other was shorter, dressed in traveling gear that marked him as nobility. The king and his brother had to be. "I didn't come all the way from South Haven to stand here and watch you pretend I don't exist." The visitor, King Aldrich, Vera realized, took a step forward. "The council is asking questions. They want to know if you're getting worse." The taller figure didn't move, didn't speak. "They're talking about permanent solutions, Kale. Do you understand what that means?" Finally, the cursed king spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the frozen air. "It means they want to kill me. They've wanted that from the beginning." "That's not—" Aldrich stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I've kept them from it this long. But I can't protect you if you won't even try to—" "Try to what? Get better?" Kale's laugh was bitter. "There is no better, there's just this. And every day it gets worse, no matter what I do or don't do." "Then let them study it. Let the mages poke at me like I'm a specimen in a jar. They don't want to help. They want to understand the curse so they can weaponize it." Aldrich's shoulders sagged. "What do you want me to tell them?" "Tell them I'm fine. Tell them I'm getting better. Tell them whatever you need to tell them to keep them away from here." Kale turned toward the window, and for the first time Vera could see his profile. Sharp features, pale skin, eyes that reflected light like ice. Young, maybe 25 at most. "I won't be their weapon or their experiment. You can't live like this." "I'm not living, I'm existing. There's a difference." Vera must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, something, because both men turned toward her hiding spot. She pressed herself against the wall, pulse hammering. "Someone's there," Aldrich said, his hand going to the sword at his hip. "I know." Kale's voice had changed, colder, sharper. "Third floor, east wing, one of the new servants." "How can you possibly—" "I can feel her, the warmth." He took a step toward Vera's corner. "She's been here 2 days, sleeps in the third room on the servants' hall, doesn't run when she's afraid." Vera's blood turned to ice. He'd been watching her, paying attention. "Come out," Kale said. Not a request. "I know you're there." She had 2 choices: run and prove she was just like all the others, or step into view and face whatever came next. Vera chose the second option. She stepped around the corner, her chin up despite the terror clawing at her throat. Both men stared at her. Aldrich with surprise, Kale with something that might have been curiosity. Up close, the curse was obvious. Frost clung to Kale's hair, his clothes. The air around him shimmered with cold. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, with an intensity that made Vera want to look away. She didn't. "You're the girl from Lowgate," Aldrich said. "The one who volunteered." "Yes, Your Majesty. You should be working, not eavesdropping on private conversations." Kale's voice was flat. "Go back to the East Wing." "I heard shouting. I wanted to make sure no one was hurt." "No one's hurt. Yet." He didn't move, but the temperature dropped another degree. "Leave." Vera opened her mouth to argue, then caught the look on Aldrich's face. The younger king was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "She's not running," he said quietly. "She will." Kale turned away. "They all do, eventually." "I won't." The words were out before Vera could stop them. Both men turned to look at her again. "Excuse me?" Kale's voice was dangerous now. "I won't run. I need this position. I need the money." Vera forced herself to meet his eyes. "So whatever you're planning to do to scare me off, you might as well do it now and save us both time." Silence. The kind that pressed down on her chest and made her regret every choice that had led to this moment. Then Kale smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You think you're different from the others. I think I'm more desperate." "Desperation isn't courage." "I never said it was." Aldrich stepped between them, one hand raised. "Kale, don't..." "Don't what? Test her?" Kale moved past his brother like he wasn't there. "You want to stay? Fine. Let's see how long you last." He extended one hand toward her. Vera knew what would happen if she touched it. She'd heard the stories, seen the fear in Hannah's eyes when she talked about Robert, frozen solid in the corridor. But she'd also spent 17 years being dismissed, being told she didn't matter, being treated like she was already gone. She was so tired of disappearing. Vera reached out and took his hand. The cold hit her like a hammer. It raced up her arm, flooded her chest, stole the breath from her lungs. She heard Aldrich shout something, felt her knees buckle. But she didn't let go. Through the pain and the ice and the certainty that she was about to die, Vera held on. Her vision tunneled, her heartbeat slowed. Frost spread across her skin in delicate patterns, beautiful and deadly. And then warmth. It started in her chest, small and fierce. Like a coal buried in ash, suddenly catching fire. The cold screamed against it, trying to smother it, but the warmth grew stronger. Light burst from her palm where their hands connected. Kale jerked back with a sound that might have been pain or shock. Vera fell to her knees, gasping, her whole body shaking. Steam rose from her skin where the ice melted. "What?" Aldrich's voice came from very far away. "What was that?" Vera looked up at Kyle. He was staring at his hand like he'd never seen it before. The frost that had covered it was gone. Just gone. His skin looked almost normal in the dim light. "You should be dead," he said quietly. "Probably." Vera's voice came out rough. "But I'm not. The curse should have killed you." It tried pretty hard. Kale knelt down to her level, his eyes searching her face. "What are you?" "Hungry, mostly. And cold. And really stupid, apparently." She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't cooperate. "Is this the part where I get fired?" "This is the part where you tell me how you did that." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not hard, but firm enough that she couldn't pull away. The touch burned cold, but not like before. Manageable. Almost bearable. No one's ever pushed back against the curse. Not like that. "I don't know what I did." "You glowed, you..." He stopped, something like wonder crossing his face before he crushed it down. "You fought it. Can we discuss this somewhere warmer? I can't feel my feet." Aldrich helped her stand, his expression a mixture of shock and calculation. "Kale, if she can resist the curse, it doesn't mean anything." Kale stood as well, backing away from both of them. "It was a fluke, a reaction to extreme circumstances." "Test it again then." "No." "Kale..." "I said no." Ice exploded across the floor, sharp enough to make Aldrich jump back. "She got lucky, that's all. And she's leaving. Now. Before I hurt her for real." Vera's legs were still shaking, but she managed to stay upright. "You don't get to decide that." "Actually, I do. This is my tower, and this is my job. I signed a contract." She met his eyes, refusing to back down. 1 year of service in exchange for 50 silver crowns. I've been here 2 days. I'm not leaving until the year is up, or you pay me what I'm owed. Cale stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held no joy. You're insane. You're the third person to tell me that this week. Cale, Aldrich said carefully, if there's even a chance she can help, she can't. How do you know? Because no one can. The words echoed through the corridor, carried by wind that came from nowhere. 5 years. 5 years of mages and scholars and desperate attempts to break something that doesn't want to be broken. And you think some half-starved girl from Lowgate is going to be different? Maybe, Vera said quietly. Or maybe I'll just be another name on the list of people who tried and failed. But at least I'll have tried. Cale looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, anger giving way to exhaustion. Go back to the East Wing, he said finally. Stay away from me. Stay away from this wing, do your work and collect your wages and leave when the year is up. And if I don't stay away, then you'll end up like Robert, or worse. He turned and walked deeper into the tower, frost spreading in his wake. Fair warning, girl, next time I might not pull back. Aldrich watched his brother disappear, then turned to Vera. You should listen to him. Should I? He's trying to protect you. From what? Himself? Vera bent to pick up her fallen bucket, wincing at the ache in her arms. How's that working out for him? The king's lips twitched. You really are insane. So I've been told. He studied her for a moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather purse. Take this. Enough coin to get you far from here. Start over somewhere safer. Vera didn't take the purse. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, it's common sense. Then I don't want your common sense either. She straightened up, ignoring the way her vision swam. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. That hasn't changed. Even after what just happened, especially after what just happened. She started walking back toward the East Wing, her steps unsteady. Your brother thinks he's a monster. Everyone thinks he's a monster, but monsters don't pull back, they don't stop themselves. What are you saying? Vera looked back at him over her shoulder. I'm saying maybe everyone's wrong about what he is, and maybe I'm the only one stupid enough to prove it. She left the king standing in the corridor, his purse still in his hand, and confusion written across his face. When she got back to the East Wing, Hannah was waiting. The older woman took one look at Vera's frost-burned skin and white face and swore loud enough to echo. What did you do? Touched him. You what? He offered his hand. I took it. Vera set down the bucket, her arms trembling with exhaustion. I'm still here, though. Barely. Hannah grabbed her arm and steered her toward the stairs. Kitchen, now. You need hot tea and dry clothes before you lose fingers. As they descended, Vera caught sight of her reflection in a frozen window. Her palm, where she'd gripped Cale's hand, was marked with frost. But instead of the angry red of frostbite, it glowed faintly gold, like sunlight trapped beneath her skin. The warmth that had fought back against his curse. Whatever she'd done up there, whatever power had awakened in her when she'd refused to let go, it was still there, humming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Vera pressed her marked palm against her chest and felt the warmth pulse in response. She'd come to this tower to survive. But maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth staying for, something worth fighting for. Even if that something wore the face of a monster and pushed everyone away. Even if it meant walking into the cold again and again until she found what lay beneath the ice. The warmth beneath her skin didn't fade. 3 days after touching Cale's hand, Vera still felt it. A constant hum of heat that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The golden mark on her palm had faded to a faint shimmer, visible only in certain light, but the power it represented remained. She didn't tell Hannah about it, didn't tell anyone. Instead, she worked. Scrubbed floors, chipped ice, carried water up 3 flights of stairs until her arms burned. Kept her head down and her mouth shut, exactly like Cale had ordered. But at night, alone in her room, she'd press her marked palm against the frost-covered window and watch the ice melt beneath her touch. Whatever had awakened in her when she'd refused to let go of the cursed king's hand, it was growing stronger. On the 4th day, everything changed. Vera was working the 2nd floor when she heard the commotion, raised voices, the heavy tread of boots on stone. She set down her bucket and moved toward the sound, curiosity overriding caution. A group of men stood in the entrance hall below. Nobles, judging by their fine clothes and the way they carried themselves like they owned the air they breathed. 6 of them, flanked by guards in royal livery. Hannah stood at the base of the stairs, her arms crossed and her expression thunderous. "I don't care what the council wants," she was saying. "You're not going up there." The man at the front of the group, tall, silver-haired, with a face like a hawk, smiled without warmth. "We're not asking permission, woman. We have orders from King Aldrich himself." "Then King Aldrich can come tell me in person. Until then, you turn around and stand aside." The noble pushed past her like she was furniture. "We've wasted enough time already." Vera watched from the landing above as the group moved toward the main staircase, the one that led to the upper floors, to Kale's wing. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. She hurried down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. "What's happening?" Hannah grabbed her arm. "Stay out of this." "Who are they?" "Lord Garrett and his lapdogs from the council. They've decided the curse is too dangerous to ignore." The older woman's voice was tight with fury. "They're here to assess the situation." "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to poke at him until the curse reacts, then use that as justification to do whatever they've already decided to do." Hannah's grip tightened. "And there's nothing we can do to stop them." Vera pulled free. "We can warn him. He already knows. He knows everything that happens in this tower." Hannah's eyes were bleak. "But knowing doesn't help. He can't fight them without proving their point." The nobles had reached the 3rd floor. Vera could hear their footsteps echoing through the frozen corridors, confident and unhurried, like they were hunting something. She ran. "Vera, don't!" Hannah's shout followed her up the stairs, but Vera didn't stop, couldn't stop. The 3rd floor was colder than she'd ever felt it. Ice coated everything in thick sheets, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with frost. She could see her breath in great cloudy plumes. The nobles had stopped outside a set of heavy wooden doors. Kale's quarters. Lord Garrett raised his fist to knock, but before he could, the doors swung open. Kael stood in the doorway. He looked worse than when Vera had seen him 4 days ago, paler, thinner, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Frost clung to him like a second skin. "Gentlemen," his voice was carefully neutral, "to what do I owe this invasion?" "We're here on behalf of the council, Your Highness." Garrett's tone was sickeningly polite. "There are concerns about the stability of your condition." "My condition is the same as it's been for 5 years. That's precisely the concern. No improvement, no change." Another noble stepped forward, younger, with the kind of face that had never known hunger or hardship. "The council believes it's time to explore more aggressive treatment options. I've been treated by every mage in the kingdom. None of them helped. Perhaps because you weren't properly motivated." Garrett smiled. "We have a new proposal, one that could break the curse entirely." "I'm not interested." "You don't have a choice. King Aldrich has granted us authority to—" "My brother granted you nothing." Kale's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Whatever you're planning, he doesn't know about it." The temperature plummeted. Ice crackled across the walls, the floor, spreading from Kale in visible waves. The nobles stepped back, all except Garrett. "This," he said, gesturing at the spreading frost, "is exactly what we're talking about. You can't control it. You're a danger to yourself and everyone around you. Then you should leave. We're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to use me." Kale's hands clenched into fists. "I've read the council's proposals. The experiments they want to run. I won't be your weapon. You already are a weapon, an uncontrolled one." Garrett pulled a rolled parchment from his coat. "This is a writ of containment, signed by the council and witnessed by the High Court. It authorizes us to take you into custody for the safety of the kingdom." Vera's blood ran cold. They were going to take him, lock him up somewhere worse than this tower, somewhere they could study the curse without interference, turn him into exactly what he feared most. Kale read the document, his face expressionless. When he looked up, something in his eyes had changed. "No, you can't refuse a council writ. Watch me." The ice exploded outward with enough force to knock the nobles backward. Vera threw herself against the wall as frost roared past her, sharp as knives. One of the guards screamed. "Stand down!" Garrett shouted. "You're only making this worse." "It's already as worse as it gets." Cale's voice had gone hollow. "You want to contain me? Fine. But I'm not going quietly." He raised his hands and the entire corridor turned to a glacier. Vera had never seen anything like it. Ice erupted from every surface, forming walls and spikes and barriers that cut off all escape routes. The nobles were trapped, their guards frozen in place by sheets of ice too thick to break through. And in the center of it all, Cale stood like a statue. His eyes had gone completely white, reflecting nothing but endless winter. "Stop!" Vera pushed away from the wall, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're going to kill them!" Cale's head turned toward her. For a moment, she wasn't sure he even recognized her. Then his eyes focused. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should they." She took a step closer, ignoring the way the cold bit into her skin. "But killing them won't solve anything. They want to cage me, study me, turn me into something even worse than I already am. So prove them wrong. Show them you're still in control." "I'm not in control," the shout echoed through the frozen corridor. "I haven't been in control since the day this curse took root. Every day it gets stronger. Every day I feel more of myself slip away." His voice cracked. "I'm becoming exactly what they think I am." Vera looked at the trapped nobles, at the ice prison Cale had built around them. Garrett was still trying to shout orders, but his words were muffled by the frost coating his mouth. She looked at Kyle, at the desperation and fear and fury warring across his face. Then she made a choice that would either save them all or doom her completely. She walked forward, straight into the heart of the ice storm. "What are you doing?" Cale's voice held an edge of panic. "Get back!" "No." Vera kept walking, her feet crunching on frozen stone. The cold was brutal, worse than anything she'd experienced before. It felt like knives flaying her skin, like her lungs were filling with ice instead of air. But the warmth beneath her palm blazed hotter. "Vera, stop!" "You said I was different." She was close enough now to see the frost in his hair, the way his breath came in ragged gasps. "You said, I fought the curse. Let me do it again." "You'll die." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll help." She held out her hand, the one marked with gold. "Trust me." "I don't trust anyone." "Then trust that I'm too stupid to know when to run." She kept her hand extended, steady, despite the tremors racing through her body. "Please." Cale stared at her outstretched hand. The ice around them screamed and grew, feeding on his indecision. Then, slowly, he reached out. The moment their palms touched, the world exploded into light. It started where their hands connected, a burst of golden radiance that pushed back against the ice like dawn breaking through night. Vera felt the warmth surge through her, no longer a gentle hum but a roaring fire that demanded to be acknowledged. The curse fought back. She could feel it, an ancient, hungry thing that had wrapped itself around Cale's heart and refused to let go. It clawed at her warmth, tried to smother it, tried to freeze her from the inside out. But Vera had spent 17 years surviving things that should have killed her. Hunger, cold, despair. This was just one more battle. She pushed harder. The light grew brighter, spreading from their joined hands to encompass both of them. Vera heard Kyle gasp, felt him try to pull away, but she held on with strength she didn't know she possessed. "Let go!" he shouted. "Not a chance!" The curse screamed. She could actually hear it, a sound like ice cracking in the depths of a frozen lake. The light blazed brighter, hotter, until Vera had to close her eyes against the glare. And then, abruptly, it stopped. Vera opened her eyes. The ice was gone. Not melted, just gone. The corridor looked like it had before the nobles arrived, cold but manageable. No frost coating the walls, no frozen guards. And Kyle, he was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. The frost that always clung to him had vanished. His skin looked normal, human. "What did you do?" he whispered. Vera looked down at their still joined hands. The golden mark on her palm blazed like a small sun, and where their skin touched, she could see something impossible. Light flowing from her into him, pushing back the darkness, warming what had been frozen for 5 years. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But it worked." Lord Garrett struggled to his feet, his face twisted with shock and something that looked uncomfortably like greed. "Impossible. The curse can't be suppressed." Another noble finished, his eyes fixed on Vera. She's suppressing it. How? Does it matter? Garrett moved closer, studying Vera like she was a prize horse at auction. If she can control the curse, even temporarily, that changes everything. Kael stepped between them, breaking contact with Vera. The moment their hands separated, frost began creeping back across his skin. Slower than before, but still there. You're not touching her. We're not interested in the girl, we're interested in what she can do. Garrett's smile was calculating. If she can suppress your curse, imagine what she could do with proper training, proper guidance. Vera felt sick. They were talking about her like she was a tool, a thing to be used, just like they'd been talking about Kael. Get out! Kael's voice was ice again. All of you, now! We have a writ. Your writ is worthless. You came here to assess whether I could control the curse. I just proved I can. He gestured to the normal-looking corridor. No ice, no danger, assessment complete. Garrett's jaw tightened. The council will hear about this, about her. Tell them whatever you want. Kael moved closer to Vera, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. But if any of you come back here without my brother's explicit permission, I won't pull back next time. The nobles left quickly after that, taking their guards and their ambitions with them. Only Garrett paused at the top of the stairs. This isn't over, he said quietly. The council doesn't forgive threats, and they don't ignore opportunities. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the tower. Vera sagged against the wall, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. The warmth beneath her skin had dimmed to almost nothing, leaving her feeling hollow and exhausted. Kael caught her before she hit the floor. Stupid, he muttered, but his grip was gentle. Reckless and stupid. Worked, though. Vera's voice came out slurred. They left. They'll be back. And next time they won't come alone. He lifted her easily, carrying her like she weighed nothing. You shouldn't have done that. Probably not. Definitely not. He was walking somewhere, but Vera couldn't focus enough to track where. Everything felt distant and muffled. What were you thinking? That you needed help. I didn't ask for help. People who need help never do. She tried to keep her eyes open, but exhaustion was pulling her under like a tide. Why am I so tired? You just channeled enough power to hold back a 5-year-old curse. That takes energy. His voice was closer now, softer. Rest. We'll figure this out when you wake up. Vera wanted to argue, wanted to ask what there was to figure out, but sleep claimed her before she could form the words. She woke to firelight and warmth. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in Lowgate, back in the church basement. Then she saw the stone walls, the high ceiling, the furniture that was too fine to belong anywhere she'd ever slept. She was in Kael's quarters. Vera sat up slowly, her body protesting every movement. She felt like she'd been trampled by horses, then frozen solid, then trampled again for good measure. You're awake. She turned to find Kael sitting in a chair by the fire, watching her. He looked different in the firelight, less like a monster and more like what he must have been before the curse. Young, tired, human. How long was I out? Vera asked. 6 hours. Hannah wanted to move you to the servants' quarters, but I thought you'd be warmer here. She looked around the room properly. It was larger than she expected, with shelves full of books and windows that showed the night sky. Cold, but not unbearably so, and notably lacking in ice. Your curse, she said. It's not as bad in here. I've learned to control it, mostly. He stood, moving to a table where someone had left tea and bread. Drink this. You need to eat. Vera accepted the cup he handed her, grateful for the warmth. Those nobles, they're going to tell the council about me. Yes. What happens then? Kael was quiet for a long moment. They'll want to study you, figure out how you can suppress the curse, and once they understand it, they'll try to use it, Vera finished. Use me. Yes. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to become a target. I became a target the moment I walked through your door. She took a sip of tea, letting the heat settle in her stomach. But I made that choice, just like I chose to touch your hand today. That was insane. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. but there was something almost like admiration in his voice. No one's ever... He stopped, shook his head. The curse should have killed you. Twice now it should have killed you. Maybe I'm harder to kill than I look, or maybe you're something else entirely. Cale moved to the window, staring out at the darkness. When you touched me today, I felt it. The warmth. It wasn't just pushing back the curse. It was feeding something. Something I thought I'd lost years ago. What? Hope. The word came out rough, like he wasn't used to saying it. For 5 years, I've been locked in this tower, watching myself become exactly what everyone fears, watching the curse grow stronger while I grow weaker. He turned to face her. And then you show up. Some half-starved girl from Lowgate who's too stubborn to run when she should. And suddenly what? Suddenly I remember what it felt like to be warm. The silence that followed was heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Vera broke it first. The council will come for me. I won't let them take you. You can't stop them, not if they have the king's support. Then we'll find another way. Cale's jaw set in a stubborn line. I've spent 5 years as their prisoner. I won't let them do the same to you. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she meant. I'm just a servant, just another person you'll eventually hurt and drive away. No. He crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. You're the first person in 5 years who's looked at me and seen something other than a monster. The first person brave enough or stupid enough to stay. His voice dropped. You're the only reason I'm not completely lost. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs. This close, she could see the gold flecks in his pale eyes, could see the way his hands trembled slightly, like he was fighting to keep the curse at bay. I don't know how to save you, she said quietly. I don't even know how to save myself. Then we'll figure it out together. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Hannah stood in the doorway, her face white with fear. They're back, the nobles, and they brought reinforcements. Cale went rigid. How many? 20 armed guards, maybe more. The older woman's voice shook. They're not asking permission this time. They're taking what they came for. Vera stood on legs that still felt unsteady. We need to run. There's nowhere to run, Cale said. The tower is surrounded. Then we fight. If I fight, people will die. And the council will use that as justification to do whatever they want. If you don't fight, they'll take us both. Vera moved to his side. At least if we resist, we go down on our own terms. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors below, shouted orders, the ring of steel being drawn. Cale looked at her, then at Hannah, then back at the window. Calculating, planning. There might be one option, he said slowly, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. He took her hand, the marked one. The moment their skin connected, she felt it again. That surge of warmth, of power, of something ancient and fierce waking up inside her. The curse responds to emotion, Cale said. Fear makes it stronger. Anger makes it uncontrollable. But today, when you touched me, when you pushed back with whatever power you have, it got weaker, Vera finished. More than that. For a few minutes, I felt balanced. Like the curse was still there, but it didn't own me anymore. His grip tightened. If we're going to survive this, if we're going to have any chance against what's coming, I need to feel that again, stronger this time. You want me to suppress the curse again. I want you to share your strength with me, willingly, completely. He met her eyes. I have no idea what that will do. It could kill you, could kill us both, or it could give us enough power to stand against an army. The footsteps were getting closer. Vera could hear voices now, Lord Garrett shouting orders, guards responding. They had minutes, maybe less. How do we do it, she asked. I don't know, the same way you did before, but more, deeper. Cale pulled her closer. You have to mean it, have to want it. Otherwise the curse will just consume whatever you give me. And if it works, then we become something neither of us has been in a very long time. His voice was barely above a whisper. We become free. The door to Cale's quarters rattled. Someone was trying to break through the lock. Vera looked at their joined hands, at the golden light already starting to glow beneath her skin. She thought about Lowgate, about the life she'd left behind, about being invisible, being nothing, being the girl no one chose. She thought about how it felt to matter. "Do it," she said. Kale drew her into his arms, and the world turned to light and ice and fire. The power that exploded from them wasn't like before. It was stronger, wilder, a force that shook the tower to its foundations. Vera felt Kale's curse rising to meet her warmth, not fighting it this time, but merging with it, gold and silver and white all tangled together until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The door burst open. Guards poured in, weapons raised, and Garrett behind them with a triumphant smile. "Seize them both." He never finished the sentence. The light erupted outward in a wave of pure, concentrated power. Guards flew backward, their weapons clattering to the stone. Ice and fire danced together in patterns that shouldn't exist, shouldn't be possible. And in the center of it all, Vera and Kale stood together, changed. Vera felt it in every cell of her body. The curse and her power locked in perfect, terrible balance. She could see frost forming on her fingertips, could feel heat blazing in her chest. Two opposing forces held in check by sheer will. Kale's eyes had changed, still pale, but now they held flecks of gold. His skin was warmer, his presence less oppressive. They'd become something new, something the kingdom had never seen. Garrett struggled to his feet, staring at them with undisguised horror. "What have you done?" Vera looked at Kale. Kale looked at her. And together, they smiled. "We survived," Vera said. The tower shook again, ice and light spiraling around them in a storm that had no name. They'd wanted to contain the curse. Instead, they'd set it free. The storm they'd become didn't stop. Ice and light spiraled around them in patterns that defied natural law, frost that burned instead of froze, fire that felt cold to the touch. Vera could feel Kale's heartbeat sinking with her own, could feel the curse that had owned him for 5 years now flowing through her veins like molten silver. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt powerful. Lord Garrett was shouting something, his face purple with rage or fear, or both. His guards had retreated to the doorway, weapons raised, but none of them brave enough to approach the maelstrom of power filling the room. "Stand down!" Garrett's voice cracked. "By order of the council. The council has no power here." Kale's voice resonated with something that made the windows rattle. Not anymore. Vera felt him reach for more of the curse, felt it surge toward him in response. But this time, instead of consuming him, it hit her warmth and transformed into something else entirely. Something controlled. The ice formations spreading across the floor weren't chaotic anymore. They formed intricate patterns, beautiful and deliberate. The light blazing from her palms didn't just push back the darkness. It illuminated it, revealed it, made it something that could be understood instead of feared. "You need to leave," Vera said, and was startled by how steady her voice sounded. "All of you, now. We have authority. You have nothing." She took a step forward, still holding Kale's hand. The guard scrambled backward. "You came here to cage something you didn't understand, to weaponize a curse you couldn't control. But you're not taking either of us." Garrett's hand went to his sword, then stopped. He was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. Whatever he saw in their combined presence made him recalculate. "The council will know about this," he said through gritted teeth, "about what you've become. They won't let this stand." "Let them come." Kale's grip on Vera's hand tightened. "We'll be waiting." The nobles fled. Not walked. Fled. Stumbling over each other in their haste to get down the stairs and out of the tower. Garrett was last, pausing only to throw one final look over his shoulder. "You've made yourselves enemies," he said. "Powerful ones." "We've made ourselves free," Vera replied. "That's worth any enemy." The moment they were gone, the power between her and Kale flickered and dimmed, not disappearing, but settling, finding equilibrium. Vera's legs gave out. Kale caught her again, lowering them both to the floor. They sat there among the frost patterns and fading light, breathing hard. "That was," Vera started. "Insane," Kale finished. "Completely insane." "I was going to say amazing." He laughed, a real laugh this time, not bitter or hollow. "That too." Vera looked at her hands. The golden mark on her palm had spread, delicate lines of light tracing up her wrist and forearm like veins of precious metal beneath her skin. When she flexed her fingers, she could see frost forming in the air around them, responding to her will instead of Cale's. "What happened to us?" she whispered. "I don't know." Cale held up his own hand. The frost that usually coated his skin was still there, but now it was threaded with gold. "The curse bonded with your power. We bonded with each other. Can we undo it? Do you want to?" Vera thought about that. Thought about the fear in Garrett's eyes, the way the guards had run from them. Thought about feeling powerful instead of powerless for the first time in her life. "No," she said. "I don't think I do." Footsteps on the stairs made them both tense, but it was only Hannah. The older woman stopped in the doorway, staring at the frost patterns covering every surface, the way the air still shimmered with residual power. "Well," she said finally, "this is going to complicate things." Over the next 3 days, word spread. The servants whispered about what had happened, about the nobles fleeing in terror, about the light and ice that had consumed the upper floors. Thomas claimed he'd felt the tower shake from the stables. The cook swore the temperature in the kitchen had fluctuated wildly, going from freezing to sweltering and back again. But none of them left. That was what surprised Vera most. She'd expected the remaining staff to scatter, to decide that whatever was happening in the tower was too dangerous to stay near. Instead, they kept working, kept bringing meals, maintaining the grounds, going about their duties like nothing had changed. On the second day, she asked Hannah about it. "Why are you all still here?" Hannah looked up from the bread she was kneading. "Where else would we go? Somewhere safer. Somewhere that doesn't have—" Vera gestured vaguely at herself and the frost that now seemed to follow her everywhere. "Safer for who?" The older woman's hands never stopped working the dough. "I've been at this tower for 8 years, watched 3 different stewards come and go, watched servants run screaming, watched that boy upstairs slowly lose himself to a curse he never asked for." She met Vera's eyes. "And now, for the first time since this whole mess started, I see hope, real hope. You think I'm going to run from that? I don't know what I am anymore." "You're the girl who was brave enough to stay when everyone else left. That hasn't changed." Hannah shaped the dough into loaves with practiced efficiency. "The rest of it? The power, the curse, whatever this bond is between you and him? That's just new armor. Doesn't change who's wearing it." Vera wanted to believe that. Wanted to think she was still the same person who'd walked through the tower gates a week ago, desperate and hungry and determined to survive. But when she looked at her hands and saw frost forming at her fingertips, when she felt the curse humming beneath her skin in perfect harmony with her own strange warmth, she knew nothing would ever be the same. Cale was struggling too. She could see it in the way he moved through the tower, testing his new limits. The curse was still there, would always be there. But now it responded to his will instead of controlling him. On the 3rd day, she found him in the tower's library, surrounded by open books. "What are you looking for?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Answers, explanations, anything that might tell us what we've become." Vera moved closer, scanning the titles. Ancient magical theory, treatises on curses, histories of power manifestations. "Found anything useful?" "Nothing that matches this." He closed a book with more force than necessary. "There are records of curse breaking, of magical bonds, of power transfers, but nothing about a curse and its opposite force merging into something new. Maybe because it's never happened before, or maybe because everyone who tried it died." Cale rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since the confrontation with Garrett. "We don't know what we did, Vera. Don't know what the long-term effects will be. This could be stable, or it could... Could what? Kill us?" She sat down across from him. "We were already dying. You from isolation, me from starvation. At least this way we're dying on our own terms." That's a cheerful thought. "I'm not known for my optimism." That got a small smile out of him. "No, you're known for being too stubborn to know when to quit. It's one of my best qualities." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by books that couldn't help them and a future neither of them could predict. "Garrett will come back," Cale said finally, "and next time he'll bring more than 20 guards. Let him." "Vera." "I'm serious." She leaned forward. "For 5 years you've been hiding, trying to make yourself smaller, less threatening, hoping that if you were quiet enough they'd forget about you. How's that working out?" His jaw tightened. They locked me in a tower. Exactly. You gave them everything they asked for, and they still treated you like a monster. Vera's marked hand blazed with light. So stop hiding. Stop apologizing for existing. Show them what you really are. And what's that? Someone worth fearing for the right reasons. Before Cale could respond, a commotion from outside made them both stand. Voices shouting, horses neighing, the clatter of many people arriving at once. They moved to the window. The tower grounds were filled with people. Not guards this time, common folk from the villages surrounding the northern district. Dozens of them, maybe more, all carrying bundles or leading carts laden with supplies. "What is this?" Vera breathed. Hana appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "You need to come downstairs, both of you." They followed her down to the entrance hall. Through the open doors, Vera could see the crowd more clearly. Farmers, merchants, craftspeople. The kind of ordinary people who usually went out of their way to avoid the cursed tower. An old woman stepped forward from the group. Vera recognized her, Morwen, the baker from Lowgate, who'd caught her stealing bread. "Your Highness," Morwen said, addressing Cale with a deep bow. "We've come to offer our support." Cale looked stunned. "I don't understand. Word reached us about what happened, about the council trying to take you and the girl." Another person stepped forward, a man Vera didn't know, weathered face and calloused hands. "We've lived in fear of this tower for 5 years, fear of the curse, fear of what you might become. But we never feared the council would try to weaponize you, to use you against your will. We may not understand magic," Morwen added, "may not understand curses or power or any of that, but we understand tyranny, and we won't stand for it." More people spoke up, their voices overlapping. They brought food, blankets, firewood, offerings of solidarity from people who had nothing to spare but gave it anyway. Vera felt something crack in her chest. These were the same people who'd watched her starve in Lowgate, who'd turned away when she begged for work or food. And now they were here, standing up for the cursed king and the girl who'd bound herself to him. "Why?" Cale's voice was rough. "Why would you do this?" The old man smiled. "Because you're not just the cursed king anymore. You're proof that even the worst curse can be survived, can be transformed into something better." He looked at Vera. "Both of you are." They stayed through the afternoon, these ordinary people with their extraordinary gesture. They unloaded supplies, reinforced the tower's defenses, and shared stories of their own struggles. Of harvests that failed and winters that nearly killed them. Of surviving when survival seemed impossible. By evening, the tower felt different. Less like a prison and more like a fortress. When the last of the villagers had left, Vera found Kyle standing on one of the upper balconies, staring out at the darkness. "You were right," he said without looking at her. "About what?" "About hiding. I've spent 5 years trying to be invisible, trying to convince everyone I wasn't a threat, and all it did was make me weak." He turned to face her. "But showing them what I really am, what we really are, that terrifies them. And maybe that's not a bad thing." "Fear can be a weapon," Vera agreed. "But so can hope. Those people today weren't afraid of you. They were inspired by you." "By us." Cale moved closer. "We did this together." The bond between them hummed, warm and cold at once. Vera could feel his emotions like they were her own, exhaustion and determination and something that might have been wonder. "The council will come," she said. Garrett wasn't bluffing about that. "I know." "So what do we do?" Cale was quiet for a long moment. "We stop reacting. Stop letting them dictate what happens." His eyes met hers. "We go to them." Vera's heart skipped. "To South Haven?" "To my brother. To the king." Cale's voice was steady now, decided. "Aldrich didn't know about Garrett's invasion, didn't authorize them to take me, which means the council is operating without royal oversight. That's treason." "Exactly. And if we present the evidence to Aldrich directly, show him what they tried to do, what we've become." He stopped. "We might actually have a chance." It was risky. Leaving the tower meant leaving their stronghold, putting themselves at the mercy of a city that already feared Cale, but staying meant waiting for the next attack, the next attempt to cage or control them. "When do we leave?" Vera asked. Cale smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Tomorrow. before Garrett can fortify his position. They spent the evening preparing. Hannah packed supplies while Thomas readied horses. The old groundskeeper, who still hadn't spoken a word to Vera, appeared with travel cloaks lined with fur. "For the cold," Hannah explained, helping Vera into hers. "Though I suspect you don't need it anymore." She was right. Vera could feel the curse keeping her warm, regulating her temperature in ways that defied normal biology. But the cloak was a comfort anyway, a reminder of normal things in a situation that had become anything but normal. That night, Vera couldn't sleep. She lay in her room, watching frost patterns form on the ceiling in response to her thoughts. Every time she relaxed, the patterns grew more elaborate. Every time she focused, they sharpened into geometric precision. A knock at her door made her sit up. Cale stood in the hallway, backlit by moonlight. "Can't sleep either?" "Too much to think about." "Want company?" Vera nodded, and he came in, settling into the chair by her window. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the night. "I'm scared," Vera said finally. "Of tomorrow? Of all of it. Of what we've become. Of what happens if we can't control this." She looked at her marked hands. "I spent my whole life being powerless. And now I have more power than I know what to do with. And it's terrifying." "Power is always terrifying," Cale said quietly. "That's why most people avoid it. It's easier to be weak, to let other people make the hard choices." "Is that what you think? That we're making the hard choice?" "I think we're making the only choice we have." He leaned forward. "The council wants to control us because they're afraid of what we represent. A curse that can be balanced instead of broken. A power they can't manipulate or contain. If we run, if we hide, we prove them right. But if we stand up and force them to see us as we really are, we might change everything," Vera finished. "Or we might die trying." "You really know how to motivate someone." Cale's laugh was soft. "I'm just being honest. This is dangerous, Vera. More dangerous than anything either of us has faced before. Good thing I'm too stupid to know when to quit." "You keep saying that. But you're not stupid. Reckless, yes. Stubborn, absolutely. But not stupid." He stood, moving to stand beside her. "You saw a problem no one else could solve and threw yourself at it until something changed. That's not stupidity. That's courage." Vera's throat tightened. "I'm not brave." "You're the bravest person I've ever met." Cale's voice was soft. "You walked into a cursed tower with nothing but desperation driving you. You touched me when everyone said it would kill you. You shared your power with me when you had every reason to hoard it for yourself." He turned her to face him. "You saved me, Vera. Not just from the curse, from giving up entirely. I didn't save you. We saved each other." "Then let's finish what we started." His hand found hers, their marks aligning. Light and ice bloomed between them. Together. They left at dawn. Hannah and the other servants gathered to see them off, worry written across their faces, but determination too. The old groundskeeper handed Cale a sword, ancient and well-maintained, with runes carved into the blade that seemed to glow in the early light. "For protection," Hannah said. "Not that you need it." The ride to South Haven took most of the day. They followed the main road south, through villages that had once been part of the United Kingdom before the curse had split everything apart. People stared as they passed, two riders wrapped in frost and light, impossible to miss or ignore. Some of the villagers pointed and whispered. Others made warding signs against evil. But some, a surprising number, bowed their heads in respect. Word had spread faster than Vera expected. The story of the cursed king and the servant girl who'd bound themselves together, who'd driven off the council's guards and stood against noble authority. To some, they were monsters. To others, they were something else entirely. Hope in a kingdom that had forgotten what hope looked like. They reached South Haven as the sun was setting. The capital rose before them, white stone walls, towers that gleamed in the fading light, streets packed with people and noise and life. Everything the northern tower wasn't. Guards at the gate recognized Cale immediately. They didn't try to stop him, didn't dare, but Vera could see the fear in their eyes as they passed. The palace stood at the city's heart, massive and imposing. Cale led them through streets he clearly knew well, taking routes that avoided the main thoroughfares, trying to minimize the panic their presence would cause. They made it to the palace gates before someone finally challenged them. "Halt!" A captain of the guard stepped forward, his hand on his sword. State your business. I'm here to see my brother, Cale said calmly. Tell King Aldrich that I need to speak with him, urgently. The captain's face went pale. Your Highness, The council said you were to remain in the tower. If you've left without authorization, the council doesn't give me orders. Neither do you. Cale's voice dropped to something dangerous. Now send word to my brother, or I'll walk through these gates whether you allow it or not. The captain looked at them both, at the frost spreading from Cale's feet, at the light blazing beneath Vera's skin. He swallowed hard and stepped aside. Someone fetch the king, now! They waited in a courtyard while runners scattered through the palace. Vera could feel eyes on them from every window, every doorway. The whole palace was watching. Then Aldrich appeared, striding across the courtyard with guards flanking him. He stopped when he saw them, his expression shifting from shock to concern to something that might have been relief. Cale. He approached slowly, cautiously. What are you doing here? Surviving, Cale said, which is more than I can say for your council's plans. What are you talking about? Lord Garrett came to the tower 3 days ago, with guards and a writ of containment. He tried to take us both into custody. Aldrich's face hardened. I authorized no such action. I know. That's why we're here, Cale gestured to Vera. Your council is operating independently, making decisions about my life, about our lives, without your knowledge or approval. That's impossible. Garrett answers to me. Does he? Or does he answer to whoever stands to profit from weaponizing a curse? Cale took a step forward. They don't want to help me, Aldrich. They want to use me. And when I proved I could resist, when Vera proved she could balance the curse instead of breaking it, they decided we were both too valuable to leave free. Aldrich looked at Vera properly for the first time. The servant girl. The one who touched you and didn't die. The one who saved me, Cale corrected. The one who turned a curse into something that can be controlled. Show me. Cale extended his hand to Vera. She took it without hesitation, and the power flared between them, controlled now, deliberate. Ice and light dancing together in perfect harmony. Aldrich's eyes widened. The guards behind him stepped back, hands going to weapons, but none of them drawing. How is this possible? Aldrich breathed. We don't know, Vera said, but it's real, and it's ours. Not the council's, not yours. Ours. The young king stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned to his guards. Summon the council, all of them. I want them in the throne room within the hour. Your Majesty? Now! The guards scattered. Aldrich turned back to Cale and Vera. If what you're saying is true, if Garrett acted without my authority, there will be consequences. But I need to hear both sides before I make any decisions. Fair enough, Cale said, as long as those consequences include accountability. They will. You have my word. Aldrich's gaze shifted between them. But I need you both to promise me something. Whatever happens in that throne room, whatever the council says, you don't lose control. You don't prove their fears right. Vera felt the curse respond to the implied threat, felt it surge beneath her skin, but she pushed it down, channeled it through her connection with Kyle until it settled. We're not here to start a war, she said. We're here to end one. Aldrich nodded slowly. Then let's see if we can make that happen. An hour later, they stood in the throne room facing the full council. Lord Garrett was there, his face carefully neutral. The other nobles who'd invaded the tower stood with him, along with half a dozen more Vera didn't recognize, all of them wealthy, powerful, used to having their way. All of them staring at Vera and Kyle like they were a problem to be solved. Aldrich sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. Lord Garrett, would you care to explain why you took armed guards to the northern tower without my knowledge or consent? Garrett bowed smoothly. Your Majesty, I acted in the kingdom's best interests. The cursed king's condition was deteriorating. Action needed to be taken before what? Cale's voice cut across the room. Before I proved I could control the curse? Before I showed your precious council that I wasn't the monster you needed me to be? You're exactly the monster we fear. Garrett's composure cracked slightly. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. You've merged with the curse instead of breaking it, made it stronger. I've made it controllable. For now. But what happens when you lose focus? When your emotions overwhelm you? Garrett gestured to Vera. And what happens when your companion can no longer suppress your power? When she grows old or sick or simply tired of carrying your burden? I'm not carrying his burden, Vera said. I'm sharing it. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand, you look like a girl who made a desperate choice and is now trapped by the consequences. I look like a girl who survived when everyone said I wouldn't. Vera's marked hands blazed with light. I look like someone who saw a curse everyone else wanted to cage or kill and found a way to transform it instead. Transform it into what? A weapon? A tool for your own advancement? Into freedom. Cale's voice was cold as winter. Something you wouldn't understand, Lord Garrett. You've never been anything but free. The temperature in the throne room dropped. Frost crept across the floor, spreading from Cale in visible waves. The nobles stepped back, several reaching for weapons they weren't carrying. You see? Garrett's voice rose triumphantly. This is exactly why he's dangerous. One moment of anger and the curse takes over. He can't be trusted, can't be allowed to roam freely through the kingdom. Then what do you propose? Aldrich asked quietly. Containment, study. Until we understand what he's become and how to... You mean dissection, Vera interrupted. Don't pretend this is about understanding. You want to break us down into component parts and use whatever you find. We want to protect the kingdom. You want to control power you don't have. Vera took a step forward, and the light around her flared brighter. Well, here's the truth, Lord Garrett. You can't control us. Can't cage us. Can't use us for whatever scheme you're planning. Because we're stronger than you, stronger than your guards, stronger than anything you can throw at us. Are you threatening the council? I'm stating facts. The room erupted into shouting. Nobles demanding action, guards moving to positions around the room, Garrett's voice rising above the chaos, calling for immediate containment. And in the center of it all, Vera and Cale stood together. Enough! Aldrich's voice cut through the noise like a blade. I will have order in this chamber. Silence fell, heavy and tense. The king stood, descending from his throne to stand level with everyone else. Lord Garrett, you acted without my authority, took armed forces against my brother based on your own judgment and fears. His voice was ice. That is treason. Garrett's face went white. Your Majesty, you only decided you knew better than your king, that your fear was more important than my orders. Aldrich turned to the rest of the council. How many of you knew about this? How many approved of Lord Garrett's actions? Silence. Several nobles wouldn't meet their king's eyes. I see. Aldrich's jaw tightened. Then let me make myself clear. My brother is a prince of this kingdom. What he is, what he's become, doesn't change that. And the girl who stands with him has more courage than any of you have shown in 5 years. He looked at Cale and Vera. I won't cage you, won't allow anyone to study or contain you without consent. You've proven you can control this power. That's enough for me. Your Majesty, Garrett started, you're dismissed, Lord Garrett, from the council, from this palace, from any position of authority in this kingdom. Aldrich's voice was final. If you object, we can discuss it in a formal trial for treason. Garrett's mouth opened and closed. Then he bowed stiffly and left, several other nobles following in his wake. When they were gone, Aldrich sagged slightly. That's going to cause problems. Everything causes problems, Cale said. At least now there are problems to solve. The king looked at them both, really looked, taking in the frost and light and power that radiated from their joined presence. What do you want? In an ideal world, what happens next? Vera and Cale exchanged a glance. We want to live, Vera said finally. Not in hiding, not in fear, just live. And in return? In return, we help protect the kingdom. Use this power for something other than destruction. Cale's voice was steady. We become what we were always supposed to be. Part of this kingdom instead of a threat to it. Aldrich considered this. Then he smiled, tired but genuine. Done. You have my support, both of you. The relief that flooded through Vera nearly knocked her over. They'd done it, actually done it, survived the curse, the council, the fear and doubt and impossible odds, and emerged as something new, something free. Outside the palace windows, the sun was rising over South Haven. A new day breaking over a kingdom that had learned to fear the dark. But darkness wasn't the enemy anymore. Together, Vera and Kale had proved that even the deepest curse could be transformed, that even the most unwanted girl could become essential. That hope wasn't just for the privileged. It was for anyone brave enough to reach for it. The problem with victory was that it didn't end anything. They stayed in Southaven for 3 days, and in that time Vera learned that winning the king's support was only the beginning. The nobles who'd stood with Garrett whispered in corners, spreading rumors about unnatural bonds and dangerous magic. Merchants refused to sell them supplies. Servants in the palace gave them wide berths, their fear barely concealed. On the second day, someone threw a stone through the window of their guest quarters. It missed Vera by inches and shattered against the wall, a note tied around it with twine. "Monsters," it read. "Both of you." Kale picked up the stone, his jaw tight. "We should leave. Go back to the tower where we're not what? Visible?" Vera took the stone from his hand. "We didn't come all this way just to run back into hiding. We came to get Aldrich's support. We have it. His support isn't enough." She moved to the broken window, looking out at the city below. "These people are terrified of us because all they know are stories, rumors. They've never seen what we actually are. What we are is cursed. That's not going to change no matter how long we stay here. Maybe not, but we can change how they see the curse." Vera turned to face him. "You've spent 5 years letting fear define you, letting other people's nightmares become your reality. When does that stop?" Kale's expression was guarded. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we show them what this power can actually do, not destroy things, help them." The idea formed as she spoke, taking shape in her mind. They had power, real tangible power that could do more than just defend against attacks. What if they used it? By evening, she'd convinced Aldrich to let them try. The slums of Southaven were like Lowgate, only bigger. Cramped streets, buildings that leaned against each other for support, people with hollow eyes and children with distended bellies. The kind of poverty that ground people down until they were too tired to hope for anything better. Vera knew these streets, had lived in places just like them. She and Kale walked through the district as the sun set, frost spreading from his feet and light blazing from her hands. People scattered at first, pulling their children inside and slamming doors. But Vera didn't stop walking. They reached a well in the center of the district, the only water source for hundreds of people. It had run dry weeks ago, forcing residents to buy water from merchants at prices they couldn't afford. Vera knelt beside it, pressing her marked palm against the stone. "What are you doing?" Kale asked. "Something stupid, probably." She closed her eyes, reaching for the warmth inside her. "Can you feel the water underground?" "I can feel the cold, the ice trapped in the earth." "Then bring it up, melt it, let it flow." Kale knelt beside her, his hand covering hers on the stone. Their power merged, ice and warmth, curse and light. Vera felt him reach down through layers of frozen earth, felt the ice respond to his call. But instead of staying frozen, it transformed, melted, flowed upward through cracks in the stone. Water burst from the well in a clear, cold stream. People emerged from their homes cautiously, drawn by the sound. An old woman was the first to approach, cupping her hands beneath the flow. She drank, her eyes widening. "It's clean," she breathed. "Fresh water, real water." Others came then, rushing forward with buckets and cups. Within minutes, the well was surrounded by people laughing and crying and drinking like they'd been parched for years. A little boy, maybe 6 years old with dirt on his face and clothes too thin for the season, tugged on Vera's sleeve. "Are you really monsters?" he asked. Vera looked at Kale, at the way his power had brought water instead of death. At the people filling their containers with hope for the first time in weeks. "No," she said softly. "We're just people who learn to survive." They spent the next 2 days doing the same thing in different parts of the city. Kale used his ice to preserve food that was rotting, keeping it fresh long enough for starving families to eat. Vera used her warmth to heat homes that had no firewood, keeping children from freezing through the night. It wasn't grand magic, wasn't the kind of power that could move mountains or win wars, but it was real. And it mattered to the people they helped. By the 4th day, the stone throwers had stopped. By the 5th, people were asking for their help instead of running from it. And on the 6th day, everything came crashing down. Vera was in the market district, helping a merchant whose storehouse had flooded when she heard the screams. She ran toward the sound, Kale appearing beside her from wherever he'd been working. They found the source quickly. A crowd gathered near the palace gates, people pointing at something overhead. Smoke. Black and thick, rising from inside the palace walls. Fire, Kale breathed. In the east wing. That was where Aldrich's quarters were, where the king slept and held private meetings, and they ran. The palace guards tried to stop them at the gates, but Vera pushed past with a surge of power that sent them stumbling. She and Kale raced through courtyards and corridors, following the smoke to its source. The east wing was engulfed. Flames consumed tapestries and furniture, spreading faster than should be natural. Magic fire, Vera realized. Someone had set this deliberately. Aldrich! Kale's shout echoed through the burning halls. Brother! A voice answered from deep within the inferno. Here! I'm trapped! They found the king in his study, surrounded by walls of flame that had cut off all escape routes. His guards lay unconscious near the door, overcome by smoke. Stand back! Vera didn't wait for confirmation. She reached for Kale's hand, and together they unleashed the full force of their combined power. Ice exploded from Kale in a wave that should have been deadly, but when it met Vera's warmth, it transformed into something else, a force that didn't just freeze the flames but consumed them, turned them into harmless vapor that dispersed into nothing. The fire died in seconds. Aldrich stumbled forward, coughing, his face blackened with soot. Someone tried to kill me. Who? Kale demanded. I don't know, one of the guards. He wasn't one of mine. I didn't recognize him. The king's eyes were sharp despite his condition. This was planned. Someone wanted me dead and made it look like an accident. Vera's mind raced. The assassination attempt, right after they'd started helping people, right after public opinion had begun shifting in their favor. Garrett, she said, you can't know that. Who else benefits from your death? Who else has reason to want chaos in the kingdom right now? Vera looked at Kale. If Aldrich dies without an heir, the council takes control. And if the council controls, they can do whatever they want with us, Kale finished grimly. Garrett didn't just want revenge. He wanted a coup. They found evidence within the hour. The guard who'd set the fire had fled, but left behind traces. A signet ring bearing Garrett's family crest, papers outlining a plan to seize power once the king was dead. Aldrich called an emergency session of what remained of the council. Garrett was arrested trying to flee the city, along with half a dozen nobles who'd supported his scheme. The trial was swift and brutal. Garrett maintained his innocence to the end, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd planned to kill the king, seize control of the kingdom, and use his new authority to cage or kill Kale and Vera. He'd failed on all counts. Treason carries a death sentence, Aldrich said, his voice echoing through the throne room. But I'm not my father. I don't believe in executing nobles for political disagreements. He looked at Garrett with something like pity. You'll be stripped of your titles, your lands, your wealth, everything you valued more than the kingdom you were supposed to serve. And you'll spend the rest of your life in exile, knowing you threw it all away for fear. Garrett was dragged from the throne room screaming about monsters and curses and the death of the kingdom. No one listened. In the silence that followed, Aldrich turned to Vera and Kale. You saved my life. Both of you. We saved ourselves, Vera said. You just happened to be in the way. The king smiled faintly. Still, I owe you a debt. He descended from his throne, moving to stand before them. More than that, the kingdom owes you. You've proven that your power isn't just destructive, that it can protect and preserve and help. We only did what needed doing, Kale said, which is exactly what leaders are supposed to do. Aldrich's expression turned serious. Brother, I know you've spent 5 years locked away, 5 years being told you're too dangerous, too cursed to be trusted, but you've proven everyone wrong. He looked at Vera. Both of you have. What are you saying? Vera asked, though part of her already knew. I'm saying the Northern Tower doesn't have to be a prison anymore. It can be something else. A place where people with dangerous magic or difficult circumstances can go to learn control instead of being feared. Aldrich's voice grew stronger. And I want you two to lead it, to show others what you've shown me, that curses can be transformed, that power can be controlled, that even the most unwanted among us can become essential. Vera felt her throat tighten. A week ago, she'd been stealing bread in Lowgate, invisible and expendable. Now the king was offering her a position of authority. a chance to matter. Yes, she said before she could second-guess herself. We'll do it. Kale looked at her, then at his brother. We'll need resources, people we can trust, and autonomy to run things our own way. You'll have it all. Aldrich extended his hand. Welcome back to the kingdom, brother. Both of you. They left Southaven a week later, accompanied by an official royal decree and enough supplies to transform the northern tower into something more than a prison. The journey back was different from their desperate ride south. This time, villages came out to greet them. People who'd heard about the well in the slums, about the food preserved for starving families, about the cursed king, and the servant girl who'd saved the actual king from assassination. They weren't feared anymore. They were becoming legends. It's strange, Kale said one evening as they camped under the stars. I spent 5 years trying to disappear, trying to make everyone forget I existed, and now everyone knows your name, Vera finished. Scared yet? Terrified. But he was smiling. You? Always. She looked up at the stars, so different from the view through her basement window in Lowgate. But I think I'm starting to understand something. What's that? Fear isn't the opposite of courage. It's just the price we pay for caring about the outcome. Vera turned to face him. You were afraid of the curse because you cared about the people it might hurt. I was afraid of starving because I cared about surviving. Neither of us was wrong to be scared. But we fought anyway. We fought anyway, Vera agreed, because sometimes the things worth having are on the other side of terror. Kale reached for her hand, the marked one that matched his own. What do you think we'll find? When we get back to the tower? I don't know. More scared people, probably. More curses that need balancing. More impossible situations that everyone else has given up on. She laced her fingers through his. But at least we'll face them together. Together, Kale repeated. And in that word, Vera heard everything they'd become to each other. Partners, equals. Two halves of something that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Stronger for the joining. They reached the tower at sunset on the 8th day. Hannah was waiting at the gates, along with Thomas and the cook and the old groundskeeper who'd never spoken. Behind them stood dozens of others, people from the surrounding villages, travelers who'd heard about the transformation happening in the north, families with children who manifested strange powers and nowhere else to go. We heard the news, Hannah said, her eyes suspiciously bright. About the king's decree, about what you're building here. We haven't built anything yet, Vera protested. You've built hope. The old woman gestured to the crowd behind her. That's more than this tower's had in 5 years. Over the following weeks, they transformed the tower from a prison into a sanctuary. The sealed-off wings were opened and cleaned. Rooms that had been frozen solid for years were warmed and made livable. The library became a place of learning instead of lonely research. The grounds, once barren, were cultivated into gardens where people could grow food and find peace. And people came. A young woman whose touch burned everything she made contact with. A boy who couldn't stop the plants around him from growing wild. An old man whose dreams manifested as reality, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. All of them unwanted, all of them dangerous, all of them welcomed. Vera taught them what she'd learned, that power could be controlled, that curses could be transformed, that the thing that made you different didn't have to make you alone. Kale taught them balance, how to live with magic that wanted to consume you, how to find the line between control and freedom. Together, they built something that had never existed in the kingdom before. A place where the cursed and the gifted could learn to be human first, powerful second. 3 months after they'd returned, Vera found herself standing on the same balcony where she'd once watched Kale stare at darkness. The view was different now. Lights blazed from every window of the tower. Voices drifted up from the courtyard where students were practicing their control, laughing when they succeeded and encouraging each other when they failed. The northern tower had become a home. Kale found her there as the sun set, his presence warm despite the perpetual cold that clung to him. Thinking about Lowgate? He asked. Always. Vera leaned against the railing. Wondering if any of those people who dismissed me know what happened, if they care. Does it matter if they know? No. And she meant it. I didn't do this to prove them wrong. I did it because I had no other choice. And now I have every choice. She looked at the tower, at the life they'd built from nothing but desperation and stubborn refusal to quit. And I choose this. Every day, I choose this. Kale's hand found hers, their marks glowing faintly in the twilight. I never thanked you for staying, for refusing to run when everyone said you should. You did thank me. Every time you choose to keep fighting instead of giving up. Every time you help someone else learn control. Every time you prove you're more than the curse. Vera squeezed his hand. We saved each other, remember? I remember. He pulled her closer, and she went willingly, settling against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat steady and strong. Do you ever regret it? Walking through those gates? Vera thought about that honestly, about the girl she'd been. Hungry, invisible, dismissed as worthless by everyone who knew her name. About the fear and the pain and the moments when she'd been certain she was going to die. About everything she'd gained by refusing to accept that fate. Not even once, she said. Below them, one of the students, a girl who generated lightning when she was scared, finally managed to call a spark without losing control. Her friends cheered, her teacher applauded, and in that moment, Vera understood what they'd really built here. Not a sanctuary for the cursed, not a school for the gifted. A place where being different didn't mean being broken, where power didn't define your worth, where the unwanted could become essential simply by choosing to survive. That night, Aldrich arrived with an entourage and a proposition. They gathered in the tower's main hall, Vera, Kale, Hannah, and a few of the senior students. The king looked tired but determined. The council has been rebuilt, he said without preamble. New nobles, new perspectives. They want to formalize what you're doing here, give it official status. What does that mean? Kale asked warily. It means recognition, resources, protection under kingdom law. Aldrich pulled out a document. It means the Northern Tower becomes the Royal Academy of Controlled Arts, a legitimate institution where people with dangerous magic can learn without fear of persecution. Vera read the decree carefully. It granted them autonomy, funding, and legal authority to teach anyone who came seeking help. In exchange, they'd train students to use their power in service of the kingdom, not as weapons, but as protectors and healers and builders. There's a catch, she said. There's always a catch. Aldrich smiled faintly. You'd have to accept oversight, not control, oversight. Regular reports to the crown about what you're teaching and who you're accepting. To make sure we're not building an army, Kale said flatly. To make sure everyone knows this is legitimate, that you're not a threat. The king's voice softened. I trust you, brother, but the kingdom needs reassurance. This is how we give it to them. Vera looked at Kyle. He looked back at her. Then they both looked at the students gathered around them, young and old, powerful and terrified, all of them desperate for a place to belong. We accept, Vera said, on one condition. Name it. No one gets turned away. I don't care how dangerous their magic is, how scared people are of them, how unwanted they've been. If they come here asking for help, we help them. Aldrich considered this. Even if they've hurt people? Especially then. Vera's voice was firm. Because those are the ones who need us most, the ones everyone else has given up on. You know that's risky. Everything worth doing is risky. She held out her hand. Do we have a deal? The king looked at her outstretched hand, the same hand that had touched his cursed brother and survived, that had shared power instead of hoarding it, that had transformed a prison into a home. He shook it firmly. We have a deal. The ceremony happened a month later. Nobles from across the kingdom gathered at the tower to witness its official transformation into the Royal Academy. Some came out of genuine interest. Others came to gawk at the cursed king and his companion. Vera didn't care which. She stood on the tower steps beside Kale, wearing a dress Hannah had insisted she needed, fine blue wool with silver embroidery, nothing like the patched rags she'd arrived in. Her marked hand was visible, the golden lines gleaming in the sunlight. Aldrich read the proclamation aloud, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. And so by royal decree, the Northern Tower is hereby established as a place of learning and transformation, a sanctuary for those whose power has made them outcasts, a home for the unwanted and the feared, led by Prince Kyle Varen and Vera Dine, who have proven that even the darkest curse can be transformed into light. He paused, looking at them both. who have proven that the measure of a person isn't their power, but what they choose to do with it. The crowd applauded, some enthusiastically, others with obvious reluctance. Vera scanned the faces and found what she was looking for, a small group from Lowgate, standing at the back. Morwen the baker was there, and Father Timon, and a handful of others who'd known her when she was nothing. They weren't applauding. They were crying. After the ceremony, Morwen approached her with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," the old woman said, "for how I treated you, for all of us who—" She couldn't finish. Vera thought about all the times she'd been hungry, all the times she'd begged for work and been turned away, all the small cruelties that had made up her life before the tower. She could hold on to that anger, could make them feel guilty for how they'd dismissed her. But what would that change? "It's okay," Vera said, and meant it. "You were trying to survive too. We all were. You're kinder than I would be." "I'm not kind. I'm just tired of being angry." Vera looked back at the tower, at the students and teachers and broken people learning to be whole. "I'd rather build something new than punish people for the past." Morwen nodded, wiping her eyes. "If you ever need anything from Lowgate, supplies, help, anything, you only have to ask." "I'll remember that." As the sun set on the ceremony, Vera found herself alone in the tower library. Students had left books scattered across tables, evidence of learning happening everywhere she looked. Cale found her there, reading one of the old texts he'd studied when he was trying to understand his curse. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "Answers about what we are, what we became when we bonded." Vera closed the book. "Do you think we'll ever understand it completely?" "Probably not." He sat beside her. "Does that bother you?" "It should, but it doesn't." She looked at her marked hand, at the power humming beneath her skin. "I spent my whole life trying to understand why I was unwanted, why my mother died, why I couldn't find work, why the world seemed determined to grind me down into nothing." "Did you find answers?" "No, but I found something better." She took his hand. "I found purpose. People who needed help. A way to transform pain into something useful." "That's not an answer." "No, but it's enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the windows. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't walked through those gates?" Cale asked quietly. Vera had thought about it. Late at night when she couldn't sleep, when the weight of responsibility pressed down too hard. What if she'd stayed in Lowgate? Found work eventually? Lived a normal, quiet life? "I'd be dead," she said simply. "Or worse, still alive but invisible, still unwanted, still expendable." She met his eyes. "Walking through those gates was the first time I chose my own fate instead of accepting what other people decided for me. Even though it nearly killed you, especially because of that." Vera stood, pulling him up with her. "Come on, we have students waiting, people who need to know that they're not alone." They descended the stairs together, hand in hand, power and curse balanced in perfect harmony. 6 months later, the tower had doubled in size. New wings had been added to accommodate more students. Gardens flourished in courtyards that had been frozen solid a year ago. The library had expanded to include texts on every form of magic known to the kingdom, and people kept coming. A mother brought her son who could speak to the dead. A soldier arrived with magic that made him invisible but drove him slowly mad. A noble's daughter whose beauty was so overwhelming that anyone who looked at her fell instantly, obsessively in love. All of them broken by their gifts, all of them taught to be whole. Vera found herself teaching more than learning now, showing students how to find the balance between their power and their humanity, how to survive when the world wanted them gone. One evening, a new student arrived, a girl maybe 14 years old, with hollow eyes and clothes that hung off her skeletal frame. Vera recognized that look, that desperation. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. "What's your name?" Vera asked gently. "Mira." The girl's voice was barely audible. I freeze things. When I'm scared, when I'm angry, She started crying. "Everyone says I'm cursed, that I'll hurt someone, that you should what?" Vera knelt to the girl's level. "Die? Disappear? Stop existing?" Mira nodded miserably. "They're wrong." Vera took the girl's hands, both of them, not caring that frost immediately spread across her skin. "You're not cursed. You're just different, and different doesn't mean broken." "How do you know?" Vera held up her marked hand, letting the golden light shine through. "Because I was you, scared and alone and certain I was going to die. But I found someone who taught me that curses can be transformed, that power can be controlled, that being unwanted doesn't make you worthless." "Who taught you that?" "A lot of people, but mostly—" She looked up at Kale, who was watching from across the hall with a faint smile. "Mostly I taught myself, by refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier." Mira looked at her hands, at the frost that was already melting under Vera's warmth. "Can you teach me?" "That's what we're here for." That night, Vera stood on the balcony one last time, watching lights blaze from every window of the tower. Kale joined her, as he always did. "Do you remember what you asked me?" Vera said. "The first night we really talked. You asked what I was." "I remember. I didn't have an answer then. Didn't know what to say." She turned to face him. "But I know now." "What are you, Vera Dane?" She thought about the girl who'd stolen bread in Lowgate, about the servant who'd touched a cursed king's hand, about the woman who'd stood before a council and demanded to be seen, about everything she'd been and everything she'd become. "I'm someone who refused to disappear," she said. "Someone who looked at a curse everyone feared and saw possibility instead. Someone who was unwanted and expendable and dismissed." Her voice grew stronger and became essential anyway. Kale pulled her close, and she felt their power merge, ice and warmth, curse and light, two impossible things that created something beautiful together. "You saved me," he whispered. "We saved each other," Vera corrected. "And now we're saving everyone who comes through those gates looking for the same thing we found." "What's that?" "Hope. Purpose. A reason to keep fighting when everything says we should quit." She looked up at him. "A chance to prove that the things that make us different are exactly what make us matter." Below them, in the tower that had once been a prison, students laughed and learned and discovered that their curses could become gifts. That being unwanted didn't mean being worthless. That even the darkest magic could be transformed into light if you were brave enough or stupid enough to try. And at the center of it all, the girl no one had chosen, and the king everyone had feared stood together, not as victim and monster, not as servant and master, but as equals who'd found each other in the darkness and refused to let go, who'd taken their pain and their power and built something that would outlast them both. A sanctuary, a home, a place where broken people could become whole, where the unwanted could become irreplaceable, where two impossible souls had proven that love, in all its forms, romantic and platonic and everything between, could survive even the coldest curse. Vera Dane had walked through those iron gates with nothing but desperation and stubbornness. She'd emerged as something the kingdom had never seen. Not a queen, though Kale had offered that title more than once. Not a hero, though the people who owed her their lives might disagree. Just a girl who'd refused to be invisible, who'd seen someone else drowning and reached out her hand instead of looking away, who'd learned that sometimes the most powerful magic wasn't fire or ice or any force of nature. It was the simple, stubborn decision to survive, and in surviving, to help others do the same. That was enough. That was everything. The tower lights blazed against the darkness, a beacon for the lost and the cursed and the unwanted. And Vera Dane, once expendable, now essential, stood at its heart and knew she was finally, impossibly, home.